back to another video. Today's video is self-care time. I need to come up with like a cool intro for that, but today's not the day. So in today's self-care time video, I'm going to be talking about my anxiety experience and my journey, I guess, through anxiety. And the reason that I'm including anxiety, like an anxiety conversation, like story time, under our self-care time video series is because I think sometimes it's cool to like treat ourselves and buy something that we really love and that we really enjoy. Sometimes it's cool to go and do something. Sometimes it's skincare. And sometimes it's talking about our feelings and like processing our emotions and working on ourselves and more intellectual and like to really think about our feelings and our emotions and our thoughts and what makes us the way we are and what we would like to change about ourselves, and then working on that. So I am a very anxious person by nature. I don't have a memory of ever not feeling anxiety towards stuff and not being like more sensitive and more anxious about stuff than other people around me. A lot of things were in my mind. A lot of things were like stuff that my parents unconsciously like made me feel. I am a firm believer now that a lot of the things that we have sort of wrong with us, or the way that our insecurities and our anxieties often come from things that we have experienced as children. So mostly from our parents, obviously, because they will be the role models that we spend more time with, or, you know, if we don't spend enough time with, that can also be damaging. And like our siblings and our family and other experiences that we have as young children and young adults even can like be really traumatizing and can really not even be necessarily traumatic, but can really change the way you view the world and that you act and the way that you sort of position yourself with other people. So I think it has a lot of impact on us, and it's like a really important thing. We have to be really conscious about what we say to other people and what we do to them, and how our actions always have a reaction and they always have a consequence, even if we are not going to be the ones to feel it. Anyway, I've always been very anxious. I've never known like my mind not to be super active, not to be super like an overthinker. I've never known myself to not be like that. So I was always like that as a child, and my parents weren't around very much because they worked a lot, and I spent a lot of time thinking that they didn't appreciate me or that they didn't care about me, and I just felt all of these things. And I think that really translated into my like anxieties and my insecurities with other people. I was always really scared that other people wouldn't like me, and I always wanted to please everybody a lot, and that wasn't very healthy. Through like school and stuff, I always had a hard time making friends and staying friends with people. I find that the hard thing for me is maintaining friendships because I don't understand how people work, and I don't understand like why people lie and say things they don't mean and do things they don't mean and act without thinking about others. And I just get really confused, and I would get really, really confused back in the day. I still do, but like less now. I guess I'm more comfortable also with myself now, so I don't worry about it as much. But at the time, like when I was younger, I just had a really hard time making friends and staying friends with people. I was very, very sensitive, and what people would do would really hurt my feelings. But I didn't know that talking about it was an option, so I never did. And I always just harbored all of these like pains that I had to like carry with me. And so the easiest thing for me was to just not keep those people in my life. So a lot of friends I started not speaking to, or I stopped being friends with, because they hurt my feelings so badly that I just couldn't cope with being friends with them anymore. So when I was in second grade, we moved from sort of the middle of the country to the south, where I lived for the majority of my life. And when we moved, I really didn't want to move because I had a really hard time making friends, and I finally had that. I had a friend group, and I didn't want to leave, and I was happy there. We moved, and I had a really, really hard time making friends there because people had a different accent. I didn't understand what they said very well, and I had a hard time adjusting. It was a completely different like zone of the country, like completely different customs, and it was just different. And my parents were always working. They were never with us, and I felt really like I'd been dropped into this like foreign planet, and I had no idea what was going on, and I had no one there to support me and to help me through that. I sort of made some friends at school, but there was a lot of things that hurt my feelings throughout time, but I didn't have any other friends, so I just kind of kept going with it. And I had like a friend group by the end of like 4th grade when we moved into like middle school. And when we moved to middle school, like it was a different school, like physically a different school. And my school up until then was literally one room, and it was 2 classes together, and it was across the like a field from my house. So it was very rural, and it was very like close and close-knit, and we were all really good friends. And then when we moved to the other school, every single tiny little school in this town was mashed together into one school, into middle school. So we were like combined with other classes and other kids that some of us had never met, most of us had never met. And that was a really hard transition for me as well. And because obviously my family was always not there, and my friends started making other friends with people, and I obviously struggle with making friends with people. And especially in this new school, a lot of people thought that I was really stuck up, and that I thought that I was better than everybody else because I came from somewhere different, because most people there were from that town, like had been born there, and I hadn't. And my parents had a really successful business, and so we had more money than them and stuff, and they thought, I don't think we had necessarily more money than them, but like they thought we did, and they thought we were filthy rich, and that I was like completely stuck up and stuff like that. And they gave me a really hard time for that, and like I was bullied pretty badly at school, and I had nowhere to turn. Like I had no one to back me up and to help me, because obviously my sister's 3 years older than me. She was like in a different school type of scenario. My parents were never there. They never like asked me how I was doing. And what started happening was I was getting bullied pretty badly, and my grades started to drop, like free falling. And my mom finally sort of took an interest in that, and I think my form teacher asked her to a meeting or something, and she suggested that I saw a therapist, I think. So my mom took me to a child therapy. I was probably like 11 at this time, like 10, 11, and I was diagnosed with childhood depression. And the reason for my depression was a really hard time at school. Obviously, I was being bullied. I was being like left behind, and like the girls would do things purposely to leave me out. And it was like, obviously you're growing up, and if you're somebody who is more sensitive and who's always had a hard time with that, it can be even more damaging than if it was like my first experience with that. And the fact that my parents weren't there to support me and to help me figure that situation out was obviously really damaging to me. I felt like I was totally alone, and that was why I was depressed. Because I was being bullied at school, like I was actually like physically assaulted like a couple of times, and you know, my things would get stolen and vandalized and things like that. Like it was rough. The first thing that my parents thought to do was to change me to a different class. So normally in like middle schools and like high schools in Portugal, I'm sure other places as well, we have like different classes. So in the 5th grade, there will be like A, B, C, D, like there will be 4, 5, 6, 10 different like classes. And by classes, I don't mean like subjects, I mean like groups of kids who then all take the same subjects at the same times in the same classrooms, you know what I mean? And then like there will be several sets of like kids in that same grade doing the same classes like together. I hope that explained that anyway. But so my parents thought at first that changing me to a different class would help, but my form teacher thought that that was a bad idea, because it got to the point where like I would have been targeted by other people as well, and that changing classes would make me even a bigger target, which is hard to believe, but like yeah. So she was of the opinion that I should switch schools. I was also of that opinion, and I really didn't want to stay there, so I decided that I wanted to switch schools, and my parents offered to let me choose whatever school I wanted to go to. I didn't want to go to another public school because I thought that that was the problem, and that other public schools, people would still think that about me, and that there wouldn't be people like me who were cultured and who were intelligent and who liked reading and who, you know, were intellectual like me. So I didn't want to go to a different public school, and I knew a girl from my swimming class who went to a private school. She's talked about it so highly, and it just sounded like a dream. And I liked her a lot and I was friends with her, so I thought, this is the solution. So my parents moved me into this private school, and it was an English school. It wasn't like, it had both a Portuguese section and an international section, but they didn't have room for me in the Portuguese section. And so they put me in the English section, which for me was like amazing. I learned a new language. Like I thought, I was super excited about it. So yeah, I started going to a different school, and again, I kind of struggled making friends, but also in private school, people are really interested in you because new people is like, everybody is different and everybody has like a different backstory and comes from different places. So it's really interesting when a new person comes in because everybody has like a story, and it was always like that. We were always super interested in new kids. So everybody was super interested in me, and I did make some friends, and some were more lasting than others. Some I'm still friends with to this day. But I did feel like, because everybody was different and everybody also came from a background with parents who had successful businesses or like empires, everybody was like on the same sort of playing field, and it was nice and it was cool. But also, mean girls are everywhere, and there were also mean girls in this school. But I think like I was getting older and I was a bit better at handling it, and I made friends. I had a boyfriend, like I had all of that. But my anxiety kept getting worse and worse and worse. My dad was a very absent presence always throughout my life, even though both of them were pretty absent, but my dad was a lot more absent than my mom. And when I was 14, 15, 16, like my dad started being a bit more present and trying to force us to have a relationship, kind of, in the sense that like he wanted, in his mind, he was never absent, and he wanted us to have like a relationship that just was never built. And it felt very uncomfortable to me, and I didn't want that. And my mom was going through depression, and she was going through stuff of her own, and they were having a lot of problems with each other and with their company. And I felt that very, very much, because I thought like they always talked about work at home, and they always like brought everything home with them. They never gave me space to express my feelings and to express myself and stuff. Like I never felt like there was time for me and that was space for me. And this might be like in my head, and it is what it is. Like it counts for whatever. I don't want people to feel sorry for me. I'm just saying like that's how I felt. Yeah, it just kept getting worse and worse, and I didn't know why, and I didn't know what it was at the time. I thought I was depressed still, but I went through a few therapists as well, but eventually they would always befriend my mom, and then they would start defending her to whenever I complained about anything, or like wanted to talk about or vent about things that she made me feel or things that happened. They would often defend her and try to get me to see her side. And that was really damaging to me, because they were not there to pick sides and to make me pick sides. They were there to listen to my problems and to help me become better equipped and more skilled at handling them, and I don't think they ever did that. When I was in my like secondary school, like high school, and doing my A-levels, I failed the first year. I was doing a lot of sciences, and although I really like science, and I think I would probably, if I was doing it today, I'd probably be a lot better at it. But at the time, I was going through so much emotionally. My family was like a bit of a wreck. My sister had moved out, so she wasn't really taking the full blow of it. But I was there in the middle of two like parents who were always fighting, who were always bickering, who were always miserable. So I didn't do very well at school, and I failed. I dropped out of school, and I decided like I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't know what I wanted out of life, and I needed to take a year out to like think about it and to like reassess. And so I did that, and I think it was a really good decision. I worked with my parents at their company, but I did my driving license. I just lived a little bit, and I waited, and I thought about what I wanted. And I decided that I wanted to go to London and study more arts and psychology and stuff, and then find out what I wanted to do for school. By this time, my anxiety was skyrocketing. It was so much worse, and I thought going to London would be good for me, and it was in a sense, but it was not good for my anxiety, because I had no way to cope with my insecurities and with my anxieties, and I was just piling things on. And I was living in a place, obviously London, which is so stressful and so like, it's such a busy, like there's always something happening kind of place, and that was really bad for my anxiety levels. And it was really hard to make friends. It was really hard to like integrate like the group of people there. Like, it was just hard, and I struggled really badly with all of that. But yeah, I started finding that I enjoyed coming back home more than I enjoyed being there. And as the second year came about, and I was spending a lot of time with people who wanted to do the same degree as me, and I really didn't identify with them, and I started thinking more critically about the job that I would actually have to do, and all of the years of like struggle through in London to go through that, and I didn't see myself doing it. And it just kept, like, every time that I thought about it, I felt more and more like repulsed by it, and I didn't want to do it anymore. So I decided that I would finish my second year, I would get my A-levels done, my high school done, and I would come back home and I would reassess. But then when I came back, my anxiety didn't really subside. I started having a really bad chest pain and really bad migraines, and I started having really bad insomnia. I wouldn't sleep for like weeks on end. And so I decided like it was a good idea to find a therapist of my own that my mom had nothing to do with, and I would go by myself, and I would start from scratch. So I found a therapist who is still my therapist to this day. He's been my therapist for 6 years. He does psychotherapy, psychoanalysis, which is sort of like the more Freudian approach to psychology. And I believe that that is a better fit for me. And I just believe generally that it is more helpful than normal clinical psychology, but that is my opinion. Yeah, so we worked through a lot of my anxiety, a lot of my like repressed things that I had in my past, and a lot of my insecurities. And like I would be anxious about everything. Like I couldn't park my car if people were on the street and they could see me. I wouldn't, there was just so many things that I couldn't do. I couldn't make decisions about anything. I saw him every week for about like 3 or 4 years. And, slowly we built up to me being able to do other things, and we started working through things. Eventually I started dealing a little bit better with my anxiety and started feeling like a little bit more like I had a grip on life. And that's kind of like my whole secret, is like going to therapy and really being an intelligent person. I read a lot about philosophy and a lot about psychology, and I read about my thoughts and my emotions, and I realized like I am the person that I am, and I don't have to please other people, and I don't have to be different for other people, and I have to just learn to love myself like for who I am, and really embrace the things that I for some reason am ashamed about myself. The person that I am today and the person that I was 6 years ago is like worlds apart. Like I sometimes think that it was like 10 or 12 years ago, because I was such a different person. I don't think I struggle with depression anymore, which is great. But I think like definitely still struggle with anxiety, even though it's much better. Like I can make phone calls and do things on my own without thinking about other people, and I'm not anxious about like posting stuff online and being honest about my experiences and things like that. But I'm still anxious about a lot of things, and obviously because of fibromyalgia, anxiety is a really big trigger, and it's something that's really hard to keep in check, and it's being sick all the time really doesn't help with anxiety and depression. Things like mental illness in general just makes your mental health deteriorate, because obviously you're alone all the time. You have a lot of like limitations, and it's just really hard. Obviously with time we started doing less therapy less often, and I think moving out of my parents' house really helped and really improved my mental health a lot, because they have a very unhealthy relationship with each other and with the world and with themselves also. Obviously, I've cut my dad out of my life, and that has felt really good. And I've obviously pushed my mom away very far, even though I haven't like really cut her out, but I try to avoid her as much as possible, because they're just very toxic people, and that's it. They're just very toxic people. And I always felt so isolated, and so I think I'm quite sensitive and empathetic, and because I was hurt so many times by so many people, I feel like that made me very aware that what I do can be hurtful to others, and I was always very conscious not to hurt other people. I find that I'm much more comfortable with myself, and so I find that spending weeks on my own without seeing anybody else apart from my partner is totally fine. And I'm quite introverted, and I like it that way. And obviously I do have friends, but the few friends that I have are very strong friendships and are very like for life kind of friendships. But yeah, that's kind of my story. I think with fibromyalgia, obviously it changed a lot. And I think that sometimes I have depressive spells where I feel depressed and where I feel very down and I feel very sad. But I don't think that it is like a depression. All emotions are helpful. All emotions are important. Anger is important, and sadness and fear, and all of emotions are important because they are ways of your body to signal to you that something is wrong. And they're important. A mentally healthy person doesn't not have problems. They simply take problems and go, okay, how do I fix this? Instead of like just completely spiraling out of control or giving up on life because they don't know how to fix this problem. Because after this problem, there's another one coming next. And there's always new problems. There's always new hurdles. There's always new challenges in life. And life doesn't get easier. You just get better at understanding the problems and at getting up after you fall, and you just get better at like hopping over the problems and like figuring them out. Like it didn't change overnight. It took me 6 years to get here. And even now, I think there's still like room to improve because I still get anxious about things that I think are silly and that I think are like not worth my energy. Yeah, so I think first of all is like becoming a critical thinker, critical like analyst of yourself. And when I say critical, I don't mean always negative. I mean like being able to see the positives, being able to see the negatives, and being able to figure out how to fix them. Not just thinking that you're bad, but thinking how you can be better. I found that doing stuff is really, really good for anxiety because we get very easily stuck in the overthinking stage, and it's very hard for us to move on to the like doing things phase. So I found that like just starting something, like you have an idea for something and you're scared and you don't know what people are going to think, and you don't know if you're going to be good at it, and you have all these like negative thoughts going like spiraling in your mind. And I find that now it's something that you work on. Okay, it's not something that like you wake up and you're good at that and you just do it. I know it's hard because I was there, and it took me like 4 or 5 years to start doing things. Most of the time it's not going to be good, and the first things you're going to do, you're going to make mistakes. But if you don't start making mistakes, you're not going to move further up the ladder, and you're not going to move further down the journey. And it's kind of like if you're on a bicycle, right? If you don't pedal, you're not gonna move. And even if you fall, and even if you lose your balance a bit, and even if you're not like if you don't have super good form, and if you're like really uneasy at the beginning, you're still moving and you're going somewhere. And doing things will help move you like further across the journey. And then with that information that you now have, more things that you're learning, more things that you're doing, you can see more things and you can think about more things. And you can see where you did wrong and how you can make it better next time. You can learn anything with practice, like just working on it, just doing it. Nobody like wakes up one day and knows how to make a dress. You know what I mean? Like you have to learn, you have to fail, you have to do smaller projects before you do that big project. You have to work towards it. So yeah. That's it. You learn, you grow, and I never assume that I'm like healed and that I'm like better and I don't need help anymore. Although like obviously now I don't do therapy every week. I do it about once a month. I've gone on for almost an hour. I need to go and make dinner. So I hope this was helpful and that you enjoyed learning about my experience, or that this can be helps you look for help if you need it. If you ever need to chat, my inbox is always open on my social media. Like you can always talk to me. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave it a like and a comment, and consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. You can also consider becoming a member on Patreon if you would like to support the channel and help me keep making content. But I think that's all of the things that I have to say. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!